show for all your latest UFC news and rumors. It's Brian Coyle. It's Sean Stanley. It's the TFM Live podcast. And it's now.
What's going on, everybody? Welcome to a special edition of TFM Live, the official podcast from FullMountMMA.com. I am your host, Brian Coyle, and I am joined by my co-host, the great Sean Stanley. Sean, how are you doing? It's the middle of fight week. It's almost here. UFC 194 is on Saturday. I can't believe it's a dream. Like, I'm living in a dream right now because this fight is actually going to happen.
Yeah, there's nothing actually standing in the way right now of this fight going down. So it's only one thing left to do, and that's to ring the bell and let them square off against each other.
Oh my gosh, it's going to be amazing. I literally can't wait. So what we're going to do is we're going to have two podcasts. You'll see this in two separate audio files on the FullMountMMA.com. This podcast, particularly, we will be talking about the news of the week. We got to talk about Ronda Rousey's interview with ESPN, the breaking news regarding UFC 196 and its main event. And we will also be previewing Thursday night's Fight Night 80 live from the Cosmopolitan on Thursday night. When you're probably listening to this, will be tonight, where we see possibly the future of the UFC as Paige VanZant headlines against Rose Namajunas in what should be a very, very technical and interesting fight. And of course, we get to see everyone's flipping favorite guy in the whole world, Sage Northcutt, the 19-year-old wonder kid that Dana White found on a regional MMA show. And we got a couple other things to talk about in this podcast, and we'll focus on the TUF 22 finale, which has a fight that could honestly come close to headlining most pay-per-views back. Even now, yes. Without a championship, if this was a championship fight, most surely would be. Chad Mendes and Frankie Edgar headline the Ultimate Fighter 22 finale, which is on Friday night on Fox Sports 1, which I can't wait for either. And then in a separate podcast, which you'll see clearly labeled on our site, we will break down UFC 194, possibly the biggest night in the history of the company. But before we get to the main event of Conor McGregor and Jose Aldo, let's talk about the news of the week, Sean. First, this was confirmed by Dana White today being Wednesday when we're recording this, that UFC 196, Las Vegas, February 6th, the day before the Super Bowl. It's a big show, a lot of eyes on sports, a lot of eyes on gambling. I mean, it just all kind of comes together. The heavyweight title rematch between Fabricio Verdum and Cain Velasquez will go down the night before the Super Bowl in Las Vegas. This was rumored to be a Brazil fight, centralized either in Rio. They were talking about doing it in some of the soccer stadiums, possibly Manaus, which was the random stadium, like way far away. All of the other stadiums, if you remember the World Cup geography, not everyone's, I know, brought up the snuff on the Brazilian geography, but it was very weird where they were talking about it in Brazil. But now it's going to be in Vegas. You get the heavyweights, Velasquez and Verdum. Number one, what do you think of the rematch even happening? Because we didn't think that Cain Velasquez was going to get a rematch the way Verdum kind of easily took care of him in Mexico City a couple months ago.
Yeah, I mean, but when you look at the heavyweight division, other than this rematch, who would make, I guess, sense as far as with this fight? That's the only thing that I just think the heavyweight division, for as much talent as some of these other weight classes have, that's probably one of the, I want to say lighter divisions, but there's not as much, I guess, up top right now. There's a very vast difference between 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6 compared to these other divisions where, you know, number 7 might get the title shot just because of the way the fights line up.
I mean, it was we couldn't figure out what Stipe Miocic was supposed to get this fight or Andrei Arlovski. That was the debate, who deserves it, who doesn't. I remember writing an article for the FullMountMMA.com, which you can just head on to right now. We have plenty of fight week coverage on our site right now. But I remember, like, Arlovski, Miocic. Arlovski kind of deserves it. Miocic really hasn't beaten anybody. But then Arlovski goes out and lays an egg against Frank Mir. Miocic doesn't even fight Ben Rothwell. Mark Hunt takes care of business in Australia, but who's he really beaten recently? Josh Barnett struggled with Roy Nelson because you literally can't beat that dude up enough for him to go down at a certain point. Junior Dos Santos was injured. Luckily, he's coming back actually in 2 weeks against Alistair Overeem on you want to talk about a card that's pretty amazing for free television. That's next week's card in Orlando, but we'll talk about that next week because we have way too much stuff to talk about this week. So this is it works out. This is the thing that makes sense the most. And Velasquez, as a former champion, depending on what your booking beliefs are or not, should get a rematch. And a lot of people chalked it up to altitude. This is the first time we've seen Cardio Kane not have any cardio at all.
Yeah. No.
So, and Verdum, people wanted to label this guy he's kind of random, came out of nowhere. But I'll tell you what, Verdum's dangerous in every way possible. He takes care of business in the octagon. His win over Travis Brown last year, very good. His interim win over Mark Hunt, knocked him out in the second round, took care of business. And it's not easy to take care of business against Mark Hunt.
No, not at all.
As evidenced by UFC 193, where he just throttled Bigfoot Silva. And then beating Velasquez, he looked smart. He looked tactical. He looked very dangerous. He wasn't violent. He was smart. He was cunning. He just trapped him, and he got him in round 3 with a submission. So it'll be interesting to see if Velasquez can finally, not fighting in Mexico City with that high altitude, I think, is a major difference. And remember, this guy, he beat Junior Dos Santos. He beat Brock Lesnar. So by no means should anyone count out Cain Velasquez, despite his history of injuries. This guy is a very violent and dangerous fighter. So I'm excited for it. I think it works out pretty well considering the booking problems that they've had with the heavyweight division. And I think we'll have a better understanding of the heavyweight title picture following this fight and following JDS and Overeem, Ben Rothwell and Josh Barnett, those kinds of fights.
Yeah, I think the top of that division after those fights will be a lot clearer.
Yes, absolutely. What else I wanted to get to news-wise, because like I said, we have so much stuff going on. It's great. We're acting like it's bad. No, it's amazing. I've been so pumped for Fight Week since Tuesday. I still can't believe this is happening. It's going to be very, very fun.
Well, we bit our tongue last podcast because we weren't so sure, but now it's pretty much a done deal.
Unless somebody falls down the stairs. No, they take elevators, so I think we should be fine.
Yeah, I'm knocking on the
We'll be okay.
I'm knocking on the Formica table right now.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Somebody who hasn't been having much fun recently would be Ronda Rousey. She made her first public comments following her shocking knockout loss to Holly Holm. In ESPN, the magazine, you can see it on ESPN.com right now. It's a very well-done story by Ramona Shelburne of ESPN, who's a terrific reporter. The way it opened up, she basically said, because people are asking when's she gonna come back and fight? When's she gonna come back and fight? When's she gonna take on Holly Holm again? The first quote in the story, it's literally the 4th line. It might be 3 to 6 months before I can eat an apple, let alone take an impact. Now, when I hear that, did she have a broken jaw? Or is she just saying this just as a metaphor or something? Or are we talking literally here? I think it's a very interesting way that the story starts off like that. And her pure reaction, what she was feeling right now when Shelburne talked to her, she said she's just really bleeping sad. Yeah. So she said she needs to come back. She needs to beat this chick. Who knows if I'm going to pop my teeth out or break my jaw, rip my lip open. I have to bleeping do it. It's a terrific piece. I recommend reading it in full on ESPN. But this combined with the news that Holly Holm's camp wants her to stay busy and fight Miesha Tate before getting Rousey, which the UFC wants at UFC 200. is very, very interesting. We mentioned it last week, Sean. We don't know when Rousey is going to come back with the timeline that she has. And you brought up the great point. What about if she fights Miesha Tate and loses? So what's your reaction to the Rousey story, if you caught any of it, and the whole kind of, I don't want to say bidding war, but the difference of opinions on what Holly Holm should do next in regards to her next title fight?
Yeah, I mean the story is excellent, but you wonder now exactly how injured she was. I think originally it was just she had some teeth loose and stitches into her lip and some plastic surgery done as far as her lips goes. But I mean, look, I mean it's been a little bit since the fight, and now she's saying 3 to 6 months before she eats an apple. I think there might be a little bit more damage than originally was expected. And then as far as you know. Holmes camp is identifying Miesha Tate as a more likely option for his client. Problem is, and this is per the Los Angeles Times, Lance Pugmire, and I apologize if I say his name wrong, but
Sorry.
he's saying that UFC President Dana White has told him that regardless of what Fresquez, which I'm guessing is Holmes' camp, says her next fight will be versus Rousey in July. But then you read the article, and Rousey's saying she ain't gonna be able to eat for 3 to 6 months. And if you do the math, that's gonna put us about what February, March. So April, May, June, July, maybe if it goes 6 months, she'll be at May. That'll give her 2 months maybe to prepare for the fight. I mean, I don't know. I mean, I guess it depends on who you want to listen to. But to me, you're taking a large risk, and I think that's where Dana White's coming from. Is if you throw her in there, Miesha Tate, and Miesha Tate wins that fight, you've almost lost your big draw of Holm Rousey 2, the only person that's put Rousey down.
Yeah, and the whole thing is with this, Miesha Tate is no slouch whatsoever. Like, Tate's been a champion. Tate has been the second best women's bantamweight fighter for a long time now.
Yeah.
And the way I kind of look at it is, we don't know how good Holly Holm is. Like, we legitimately don't know, because she caught Rousey on Rousey's worst night, for sure. And she played perfectly, did her plan perfectly. She looked dangerous.
Yeah, and plus Rousey stood right in front of her, which I don't think Miesha Tate's going to do.
Oh, and speaking of Rousey standing right in front, apparently the plan's not changing. She's sticking with Glendale Fight Club, which I think is a huge mistake. And I think Holly Holm, if that's the case and she goes in the UFC 200, I think Holm wins again. Because Ronda Rousey, when you look at her arsenal of moves that she has, I mean, you can hit the mitts as much as you want. That's not going to change the fact that you're standing on a kickboxer's or a boxer's sightline. That's not going to mess with the fact that you're not moving right. That's not going to mess with the fact that you still haven't thrown a kick, to my knowledge, in a fight. Like, these are things that's full of a complete mixed martial artist's arsenal. And Ronda Rousey is terrific at taking people, throwing them, maneuvering on the ground, utilizing her judo. And she was better than everyone else at it. But when somebody came along with all of those skills, and Holm just shrugged Rousey off like it was nothing when she tried to flip her.
Yep. And
that's why people talked about Bethe Correia being a decent matchup for Rousey, because she had just grown up as a mixed martial artist. Well, the problem was she wasn't a very good mixed martial artist. Doesn't matter if she had all the tools or not. She just wasn't very good. She was way too nervous. She psyched herself out. She had no chance at all going into that fight. Holm, on the other hand, has so much experience, has terrific coaching, knew exactly what the plan was, and executed it perfectly. Is she a better all-around fighter than Rousey? We don't know at this point.
Yeah.
But we know where she's better at in certain positions, and it looks like it kind of, I mean, while Rousey's excellent when it comes to judo and that kind of grappling and submissions, Holm's better all around. The way I look at it at this point, excuse me, which is astounding to say, just a month out of probably the most shocking upset outside of Matt Serra's win over GSP ever in the sport.
Most definitely.
So it's like, this is a story to watch because I'm not so sure when Ronda's going to come back.
I'm not so sure, and I think Dana White is they're going to have to do some. Dana White may have some splaining to do depending on how they're going to work this out, because I don't know if you keep Holm out past July. I think if Rousey's not coming back by July, I think you have to give Tate the fight.
I think Tate gets the 200 fight.
But then, I mean, oh my goodness, if Tate wins that fight, that has just destroyed, to me, and not destroyed UFC, but I mean, as far as a money fight that they could promote, that I believe, I mean, I don't know how you can work up a third fight, Tate Rousey, and put a spin on it to where now, Tate's the champion and Rousey's coming. I just don't know how you do that from a market. I mean, people are going to buy it because it's Rousey, but I mean, how much you lose if Holm loses that belt, to me, is pretty significant.
And I think the thing that we're now looking at when it comes to women's MMA in this division, I mean, I heard Demetrius Johnson talking about this on Joe Rogan's podcast last week. Women's MMA is now catching up to what men's MMA is stylistically and technically, because you're getting more and more fighters and you're learning more and more, and the training methods have advanced, where we're at a point where you're going to get 4 or 5 girls that can fight and take each other out in this division instead of one person over the top that can win. Johnson talked about being in the same locker room as Kat Zingano, and Kat Zingano was so focused and so crazed and so emotional when it came to the fight against Rousey. She came out, threw a flying knee, bam, caught her, over. So now you're getting fighters that aren't intimidated by all of this, that are going through just as hard training as Rousey and are more technically skilled, and the pack is coming to her, or Rousey's coming back to the pack. Either way you want to look at it.
Let me ask you this though, Brian, because now Holm is probably one of the few, and I'm not saying that none of them have, but I mean, she's had, professional fights as far as boxing. She's been up in that level of fights on that stage where she was the woman, the person that everything's been booked around. So she's been in those situations, and I think that helped her in this one, because usually you see everybody kind of just come out and just get caught and nailed and lose their game plan and everything else when, Rousey don't touch gloves and they come out like, oh, I'm going to do this to her, and then she catches them and takes advantage of that. Holm came out cool, collected, and executed her game plan like she had been there and she had done that before.
Yeah, and I completely agree with you in that point. And I want to relate. This is a perfect kind of relation to the way, like, Rousey held that intimidation factor over everybody, and Holm was like, "No, I've been in title fights before. I can handle this." I kind of relate it to the way McGregor is now approaching his opponents, because when you saw him fight Chad Mendes, Mendes was talking so much crap back at him, but Mendes was never kind of like that kind of fighter. Mm-hmm. And he was trying to get back at him. Wasn't succeeding as well. Aldo on the Media World Tour, same sort of thing. Aldo, on the other hand, with this build-up, has been much quieter. And he's not letting McGregor get into his head. I think this fight will be much closer than it would have been in July, believe it or not, because of the way Jose Aldo has approached this fight and the way McGregor has approached this fight. If you noticed during their press conference today, McGregor was not this crazy, talking so much trash kind of guy. He was still talking crap, but it was much more subdued. It was much more like focused, because it's now he's realizing at this point, like, this is the greatest featherweight pound for pound in the history of sport. This is a big deal. This is like a huge freaking deal for the entirety of everything. But getting back to Holm and Rousey, Holmes next time she has to go out and win, and if not, then it will hit. I think her losing will hurt the promotion for sure in the short term, but will it mean will it be something better for the whole of women's mixed martial arts for competitiveness? Possibly, Will that impact? Will that be a good thing for money? We don't know until that all shakes out.
Well, I think possibly also due to the fact that what happens if Tate wins the fight and everything else? Now Rousey comes back, dominates Tate for the third time or second time, and then and is the champion again. Now are we back to where it began? And can you build up? Where do you go from there? It just seems like you're almost like you're gonna go right. It's gonna be a vicious cycle, is what it seems like to me. If Tate wins it, if Holm wins it, and then there's another good fight, and I think you can build people up there. I think and I think Dana White knows this. I think he's smart enough, as he said. I should lose my promoter's license if that's not the next fight. He understands from the business side, the money is Holm Rousey. The problem is Rousey going to be available for this fight? And if she's not, how do you work it out to where you try to keep the belt on Holm? And that's going to be something that's going to be difficult for Dana White, to me, because they kind of, everybody thought Miesha Tate was going to get that next shot, and then Holly Holm slid in there, and everybody's like, what?
Yeah.
And now Tate's at that point now to where, this is her shot, and now if they slide somebody else in there, how do you justify that if you're the UFC and Dana White? So it's going to be interesting if Rousey is not ready for this fight, because I think it throws a lot more turmoil in there, because Miesha might be, the number 2, ranked fighter in the bantamweight division, but at the same time, do you take that chance of giving that shot to her and costing you more than if you try to put, but then again, as we've seen in MMA and UFC, anybody can beat anybody on a given night. So you never know. You could bring up a number 8 person and they walk in and beat Holm like that, and
don't
15.
Count out Juliana Pena. Don't count out Amanda Nunes. Don't count out Kat Zingano.
So you really don't know who you want to put in that position now to cost possibly the UFC a bundle of money.
Mm-hmm. These are good problems to have, though, if you have 2 good fighters instead of 1 in a division.
Definitely, yeah. There's not a. We can sit here and say, it's not a bad thing. It's not a good thing, but Dana White and them are always, whether you want to say it or not, they're looking at the dollar signs, and I don't think they want to cost themselves that money. But then again, if you're put in that position and your back's up against the wall, you're gonna have to make a decision. What's it gonna be?
Yeah, and let's transition right into our previews of UFC Fight Night 80 and the TUF 22 finale, because I want to start off transition from the women's bantamweight to women's strawweight, because that's our main event tonight. Rose Namajunas and Paige VanZant. And this has kind of been built up. This was supposed to be Paige VanZant against Joanne Calderwood. And this was supposed to be the Paige VanZant coming out party. The hype train behind 12-gauge Paige. And VanZant, of course, 21, 22 years old. Or 21 years old, excuse me. And she has the look, she has the skills to be that one of those budding stars the UFC can have on the women's side. I wrote an article about her and Sage Northcutt, who we'll get to live on the fullmountmma.com, which you can check out right now. Basically talking about the UFC is always looking to build new stars, because you never know. Father Time's undefeated. You never know when somebody's going to go down. You never know. Ronda Rousey was going to go down, like out of nowhere. Paige VanZant's got a 3-fight winning streak, and she's progressively beaten better fighters. However, Rose Namajunas, she's dangerous. The number 3 ranked strawweight, she was in that same kind of position. She kind of got a little push before losing to Carla Esparza with regards to TUF 20. This is a very tough fight for somebody like VanZant, who doesn't have a lot of experience underneath her belt, and she's only 21. What do you think of the matchup now that she has Rose instead for this main event?
Before we said, it's going to be interesting to see how they build her up. And, when you look at, her record as far as Namajunas says, you don't know I mean, she's dangerous, and are you setting up Paige VanZant for that loss? And then you wonder, is a loss right now going to be a damaging thing to her career? I don't think so.
I don't
Even
think so either.
even if she was to lose, I think she's young enough to where, look, this is a learning experience. Chalk it up and learn from it, But I mean, I was just looking at the nicknames, and I almost started giggling as I was looking at them. It's, Rose is Thug, and Paige
Yeah.
VanZant is 12 gauge.
These are dangerous fighters. Like Paige VanZant on the ground, her ground and pound is outstanding. Namajunas is all 4 wins have come via submission.
Yeah.
So this
question:
is going to be
this is a 5-round fight, right? Because the main event, or do they change? Yeah, 5-round fight. So
I believe it's a 5-round fight. Yeah,
it's 5 rounds, and I mean, you look at Rose is not. I mean, round 1 submission win over Angela Hill, which was the last fight at Cormier Gustafsson, UFC 192. She had the loss in a submission round 3 to Carla Esparza. You look at VanZant, and she's gone to round 3 every fight, and one was a decision, submission, and then a TKO. So she's been in those round 3 fights. So could that possibly play a role in this fight?
VanZant's she's got great cardio. Watching her at 191, she was very impressive when it came to dominating the fight, getting her opponent onto her back and keeping her there and not letting her get in any offense. I don't know what she's going to do against Rose.
Yeah. It's almost it's a lot about game planning, I think, with her and her team. I think it's going to be interesting to see how she comes out.
Because remember, VanZant comes from Team Alpha Male, and they are strong on the ground. But Rose Namajunas' game is submissions.
Yes.
And I mean, and everyone's talking about, oh, she got a haircut, like she shaved her head before the fight or whatever. That's the story with her for some reason, and it shouldn't be, because this is a terrific opportunity for her. So what? She shaved the head. She wanted to do it. Who cares? This is a terrific opportunity for her to get back into that kind of hype machine, to get back inside that kind of 115-pound division hype, along with Joanna Champion and Claudia Gadelha. And I say champion because Jacek is really hard to say a bunch of times. And no offense to her. It's a lot sometimes. But regardless, this is a great spot for both of them. And I think there's a lot to gain, and there's not that much to lose on either side, if that makes any sense.
No, it makes a lot of sense. I mean, they're both, still, they're both young and then relatively, in the UFC. There's just, I don't think, unless, the only thing I can think of is one fighter gets dominated enough to where it kind of breaks their confidence. But I mean, I don't think that's what's going to happen here. I just think it's going to be interesting to see, as you said, with her ground game, the submission game, and then, Alpha Male's known for that. Do you go a different game plan? What's the game plan they set into effect? It's a 5-round fight. Neither of them have probably been in a 5-round fight. If it goes that far, will they be? I'm sure they will be prepared, but will it play that much of an effect on this fight?
Yeah, and it's interesting because the winner of this fight, do they get the next shot behind Gadelha? Because Carlos Esparza, Tisha Torres, Letourneau is not going to get another title shot anytime soon, but that could be a possible opponent for whoever wins this fight. So there's a lot on the line here, and I think it will be an entertaining fight for sure for fight fans. I don't know if this is going to be a knock 'em out brawl, like an oh my god moment. I think that will be more reserved for another fight on this card featuring Super Sage Northcutt. And I love the story about Northcutt because when you watch Looking for a Fight, Dana White's show, the pilot's on YouTube, and it's all about finding Northcutt, actually, because he's searching for fighters. And supposedly CM Punk's opponent's going to come from this show, which is very interesting indeed. Whenever Punk hopefully gets in the octagon soon because, dude, you're running out of time.
Man, that Father Time. He's undefeated, as you say.
I told you, it's not good. But Sage Northcutt gets Cody Pfister, who, I mean, has the look of a dude who's probably going to get knocked out in the first round against Northcutt. I'm just saying, I would not bet on Cody Pfister in this fight.
You don't like him, do you?
He's come off, like, it comes off really bad in every interview or media availability that I watched. And it's not like one of those, he just comes off one of those dudes that you really don't want to root for.
Mm-hmm.
And I try to keep my emotions out of my opinions of fighters. But then again, when other fighters are calling him a tomato can, and guys are like, oh, he got that fight, no wonder, because they want to build up Northcutt, which, I mean, is fine with me because Northcutt's 19 years old, and you're in literally the deepest division roster-wise. I think it's 110 lightweights.
Yeah.
Contracted by the UFC, which is a lot. So I'm not surprised that he would get something like that. Remember, Pfister's only 1-1 in the UFC. He last won via unanimous decision against Dennis Cedeno at UFC 189. So, I think Northcutt's going to just knock him out because the kid looks like he has that ability to be special. It's something about the way he goes and attacks and doesn't sit on his back foot. He's got lethal kicks from what we've seen so far. I mean, he beat up basically a nobody in Trevino, who I believe missed weight for that fight. Mm-hmm. Like, he didn't care at all.
But will the bright lights, will that affect him? I mean,
I don't think so at all.
You know, it's going to be interesting to see now. I mean, because it's different when you go to these little regional events. I mean, yeah, he might have been the main event on that card, but that is so very different than stepping into and being on a headlining card of the UFC.
I think his hardest thing is over. He fought in front of Dana White and made Dana White like appear out of the crowd to be like, hey, that was really good. It's great. If you watch, there's a clip. It's like only a 4-minute clip that you probably have to watch from the show that the UFC has about Northcutt. And it's basically Matt Serra and Dana White and a couple other guys sitting in a restaurant before the fight, and they're looking at the lineup, and it's Northcutt looking like a tanned bodybuilding model before the fight, and they're just making fun of this kid, like ragging on him, like, look at this dude, like, he's gonna fight, like, are you serious? And then Sarah and White, they just sit next to each other and they just go, oh my god, oh damn, they didn't say damn.
He said that was the first fighter that's really made him make that much of a difference. I could take from when he looked at him and said, hey, this guy's not gonna be able to fight. He's one of the few that have actually changed his look at the person that he looked at before the fight.
Yeah, absolutely. And I just don't think Pfister's any good. Like, personally, there's been no evidence to the contrary. And while Northcutt did have trouble, like you had mentioned last podcast, he couldn't get through. He was having trouble getting through some of the drills at TriStar.
Mm-hmm.
He is going back to the gym after this fight. Okay. He's going back to train with them. So I think it was more of the fact, I mean, number one, it's probably tough for his dad, who's trained him all his life, to immediately like let this kid go once he gets kind of into which is a good and bad thing, because we don't know. I mean, personally, we don't know if his dad is one of those, one of those dads. Like one of these guys who's like morphed Sage Northcutt into this ball of clay and just put him into this, and this is what I want him to do, and I'm going to do this, and and Lenny this kid, his fight career to death here.
Mm-hmm.
But I like the way, I think Northcutt will get out of this fight completely fine. I think he'll knock him out, and the best possible thing for him is to get into that TriStar gym. Firas Zahabi, if not the best trainer in the entire world. And now, when you go through training, you can have those days where you get gassed and you don't make it through those workouts because you don't have a fight coming up. So they're going to get this kid into the machine and see if it spits out another champion. Because, I mean, you have McDonald, you have GSP, you had a whole bunch of great fighters from TriStar. And I don't see how that could be a bad thing for this 19. I mean, he's only 19. So you can keep giving him guys like Cody Pfister for a little while, have him fight 4 times a year, and then we can kind of start talking about getting ranked guys when he's 21, which is insane. But, like, this is the way you can kind of build up Northcutt. You have a lot more time with him compared to what you have with VanZant, because they're 2 very marketable stars. They're both good-looking fighters. They're both have great personalities. I mean, unless Sage Northcutt is pulling the wool over everybody's eyes, he's the most polite person, like polite, happy-go-lucky kid you could ever meet, apparently. I mean, all these media evals that he's done, so hopefully they can develop these kids into stars. And I say kid, I'm only a year older than VanZant and 3 years older than Northcutt. But hopefully they can bring them along and develop them, and we can really see something special, because it's always good to have more stars, because you don't know how much longer the people at the top will be at the top. So
yeah, and you wonder with Rose and Paige VanZant, you wonder if that could end up being down the road 2 of the names, because I mean, Rose is only 23.
Yeah,
you know, I mean that could be a battle for years to come in the strawweight division, or even, you know, moving up.
Yeah, it's a star-making possible fight. So I think they have a perfect stage for it on Fight Pass. The other thing we want to talk about in this podcast specifically would be the Ultimate Fighter finale, which is on Friday at 10 o'clock on Fox Sports 1. And the fact that we get to watch these fights for free is insane, because they're really good. Really, really good. What do you want to get to first on this card? Because there's 2 fights in particular that I want to touch on. But when you look at Evan Dunham and Joe Lawzone, that's going to be a fun fight. Gabriel Gonzaga's on this card. Ryan LaFleur is on this card as well. But the ones I think we should focus on the most is Edson Barboza, Tony Ferguson, and obviously Frankie Edgar and Chad Mendes. Where do you want to start, Sean?
Why don't we just start with the co-main event, Edson Barboza, Tony Ferguson?
Oh my God, this is going to be a great fight. Like, and I'm going to say this about like every fight, but it's true. We watched the last time I watched Barboza, we saw him absolutely. His kicks are certifiably insane. They're the fastest kicks I've ever seen. The last time we saw him fight was at the UFC Fight Night on Fox in Chicago against Paul Felder, where I think he may have broken one of Felder's ribs, and one of his kicks went accidentally downstairs, and Felder wasn't the same for the rest of the fight.
Mm-hmm. I think he broke a rib and then like somehow kicked it back together, as bad as his body looked.
Barboza's an absolutely insane striker when it comes to kicks. Very, very dangerous. He's won 3 out of his last 5 fights, with his loss coming to Michael Johnson, who's a terrific lightweight.
Yep.
Cowboy Cerrone, who's fighting for the title next week.
Some good losses.
Yeah,
if there's such thing as a good loss.
Yeah, in the UFC, there is. That's the beauty of it compared to boxing. Beat Evan Dunham, also on this card. Beat Bobby Green. Excuse me. And he beat Felder, as we mentioned, who was on a roll up until that fight. That was a fight night. I mean, he outstruck him 64-47, 3 rounds. Kind of dangerous. But he's an absolutely thrilling fighter, and this is a fight of the weekend candidate. Because Tony Ferguson, I mean, who had a great line about Conor McGregor that I cannot repeat on air, because he may have called him a certain word about when he comes up to 155, as McGregor's rumored to do. Ferguson is coming off of wins against Abel Trujillo, Danny Castillo, Leeson Tabao, Josh Thompson. He was gonna fight Khabib in this fight until Nurmagomedov pulled out with a rib injury, and Barboza was the perfect substitution to slide in here. I think Barboza wins personally, because I'm very high on him. Watching him fight and how fast he moves and how dangerous of a striker he is.
Yeah, I agree.
He can be very, very very dangerous, but it will be interesting to watch if Ferguson kind of takes that away from him, takes him to the ground a little bit, crowds him, pressures him, because he's got a great striking defense. He's avoided 70% of the strikes thrown at him. I just think this is a kind of fight where, like, if you're a casual fan and you're like, oh, I don't know too much about this guy, you're going to be standing up and yelling at the TV by the end of this fight. Period. I just think it's going to be absolutely outstanding. What are your thoughts on this one?
No, I agree. I got Barboza as well. Just look, I always mess around like when I watch the fights with my friends and my dad. If somebody kicked me that hard,
Oh,
I don't think I just be like, you know what, you want this more than me, man. All right, here you go, buddy. There you go. I'm done.
I don't think I would get up.
No,
I don't think I would get up for like a week.
No, I mean we'll get into a little bit more, but I mean, just the way he does the kicks and I mean, he's got the Muay Thai. He's very decorated in Muay Thai, so I mean, getting hit with that's got to be getting hit like with a tree.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just I think and as you said, Ferguson, if he can crowd him and stay away from that and his striking and get him to the ground or something, we may be talking about a different fight, but. I mean, Barboza's going to come out swinging. I mean, not even kicking, not even swinging. And I just think that's going to be the difference in the fight.
Yeah, I mean, I think Ferguson's going to have to go at him and take him down a little bit because what do you do to a striker? You make him strike from the ground.
Yep.
You take away his best. I mean, if I got hit with a Barboza kick, I don't think I would get up for like a week. I would still be in the octagon where they were like sweeping it. Like this janitor would come in, I'd just be laying on the ground.
just sweep around me. Just sweep around me, man. Sweep around me. I'm not moving.
I ain't getting up for a little bit.
I'm wondering if Ferguson can use maybe some like one of his, if he can time one of his kicks and use that to kind of be like the takedown for him, because he's going to catch him. If you want to stand in front of one of those kicks, I don't even know if you want to do that. That might not be the brightest thing, but if he can stand there, catch the kick, and at the same time, kind of use that as the takedown, because you'll catch him a little bit off balance. But other than that, I mean, I don't know if you sit there and let him open fire on you with those kicks. There's no way.
And by the way, the winner of this fight should fight Khabib Nurmagomedov whenever he can come back, because that would be just an outstanding fight. Just period. Just throwing that out there, because thankfully I don't think he's retiring due to injury. I think we're finally going to get to see the undefeated Russian fight for the first time in a long time. And in the main event for TUF 22, Frankie Edgar versus Chad Mendes, the legendary Frankie Edgar, repping Toms River, New Jersey very proudly. It's not like I have a dog in this fight, Sean, but very excited to see Frankie Edgar fight on Friday night. Coming off a win against Uriah Faber, where he pretty much took care of business. Like it was 5-round decision, but it wasn't close. Frankie's riding a big win streak right now. He's 4-0 since losing to Jose Aldo in 2013 in the championship fight that they had, beating Charles Oliveira, BJ Penn, Cub Swanson, and the aforementioned Faber. He goes up against Chad Mendes, who
not too shabby himself.
No, not at all.
Losses to Aldo and McGregor. I mean, but he's beaten Guida, Lintz, and Lamas.
I mean, Ricardo Lamas is no slouch either. No. Like, that guy's been really good, and he's been, I don't want to say embarrassed, but he's been beaten by Mendes and a couple others, and he's a tough-ass fighter. Yeah. Like you mentioned, McGregor's only losses come to Jose Aldo, and Mendes' only loss come against McGregor and Aldo.
Yep.
And getting Frankie Edgar here, which is essentially whoever wins this gets the next title shot, possibly if they don't do a rematch. Either way, whatever the case may be. I kind of throw Mendes' performance against McGregor out past the second round.
Mm-hmm.
18 days notice. Mendes was living the high life. Came in, huge payday, obviously. Tried his best, was gassed in the second round. McGregor caught him a couple times. He wore him out on the ground, which weirdly enough, because Mendes was pushing the pressure, but McGregor making him work on the ground did a number on him, and he was knocked out.
Yep.
What are you seeing out of this fight? Because it could go either way.
Yeah, I mean, you got two very good, wrestlers. I mean, they're both accomplished.
Oh, for sure.
So I mean, it's going to be interesting. Again, I keep saying it, but it's really going to be about the game. And we talked about it with Ronda Rousey and how bad her game plan was. You wonder how these guys are going to do because, what is it? Mendes trains with Faber, so you wonder, Faber's just in there, lost a decision to, to Frankie Edgar there. And I mean, when you look at you got such. I want to say even combatants, and both of them had May and July time frame off. So you're looking at 7 month rest and almost a full 5 months of rest for Mendes. I mean, even though he fought quickly, he took that fight with 18 days notice there, but they're ready. It's going to be who had the better camp, and again, who's going to come out and what game plan are they going to try to execute, and does the other one take them out of that game plan? I don't even know who to pick in this one, man. I just know it's going to be a great fight, and I'm going to go. I know you like your New Jersey boy.
I am. I'm a little partial to the answer.
So I'm going to have to go just because let's be a little bit different here. I'm going to go with Mendes in this one. So we can have a little bit of a Edgar beat Mendes type thing here on the show.
Oh, absolutely.
I'm putting my money on Mendes.
If I had money to put on someone, I would be putting it on Frankie Edgar. The way I look at it is this. I don't think this fight is ending. I think it's going 5. I don't think anybody's getting knocked out. I mean, Edgar's and Mendes are both really tough guys. They're really tough chins. They can take a lot of punishment. I'm throwing Mendes' knockout against McGregor out. Because when you watch these guys when they fought Aldo, they both went the distance.
Mm-hmm.
They take some serious punishment, and they can dish it out even more, too. So I'm going Frankie just to the fact that I think he'll rack up more points when it comes to being on the ground, which is insane given the fact that Mendes is such a terrific wrestler. I think the wily veteran edge is Frankie Edgar's. And I mean, the guy's been a champion. You can't count that out. He's been a champion at 155. And I wouldn't be surprised if at 145 he wins this fight and he sees the fact that, oh, wait, they're doing a rematch at 145. Why don't I fight at 130? Like, Edgar could seriously fight at 3 different weight classes, too. He's a very versatile fighter. He can adjust on the fly. I just think he's got a little bit more of an edge than Mendes, but I would not be shocked if this fight went either way. I think it's going to be absolutely terrific. I mean, and that's just Thursday and Friday, dude.
Wait, there's more, you mean?
But wait, there's more. So what we're going to do right here is we'll have a podcast go up Friday morning if you're listening to this on Friday, and then it will be there for you to listen to right now. When we're going to jump to UFC 194. We'll preview the entire fight card, go through McGregor and Aldo in depth, probably talk about it way too much, but it doesn't matter. This is what you're here for. TFM Live, the official podcast of the FullMountMMA.com. If you're only listening to this one, you can follow me on Twitter at bcoyle11. You can follow Sean at SS Sports Talk. Follow the site at The Full Mount. Breaking news all fight week, including next week and every week after that. So we'll have plenty to cover. We're going to take a quick break. Well, technically for us because we're recording this back-to-back. And then in our next podcast that you'll see coming up, we will do a complete preview of UFC 194. Sounds good, Sean?
I'm in.
All right, let's do it. Thank you guys for listening. Tune into, if you're listening on Thursday, tomorrow's podcast. If you're listening on Friday, tune into the podcast. You can listen to it right now. Thank you guys for listening, and get ready for our preview of UFC 194 Aldo versus McGregor.
The TFM Live podcast is brought to you by TheFullMountMMA.com. Check us out on Twitter at The Full Mount.